Welcome to R&R Living Life. For this, our third instalment of our trip to Cape York. What an interesting day it turns out to be. After a good night's sleep, even with a narrower bed than usual, we were ready and on the move by 7:10. It was hard to leave the RV camp overlooking the Daintree River floodplains and the cattle grazing, but we were on the clock, so made our way back to the jetty to cross the Daintree. Our first incredible experience for the day. You hear stories about the river, but I don't think you can ever really envisage just how wide it is. Once aboard the Daintree ferry, a cable ferry that operates daily, connecting the northern Daintree rainforest and Cape Tribulation, it took roughly 15 minutes to cross the river, and I think cost us about $45. Once on the other side, we were on our way up the Cape Tribulation Road, a fully sealed road as far as Cape Tribulation, through dense rainforest, widely considered one of Australia's most scenic routes. Hemmed in by rainforests on both sides of the road, I felt a little claustrophobic in places. The road travels through the heart of the wet tropics and features World Heritage listed rainforest, waterfalls, creek crossings, rainforest-clad ranges, and stunning views. From Cape Tribulation, the road is only partially sealed, with very steep ranges and natural creek crossings, with gravel coverage on some sections having been washed away during the wet season. It certainly is a wild and beautiful part of North Queensland. About an hour into our travels, we stopped at Alexandra Range Lookout, surrounded by steep rainforest-clad slopes, where we soaked up the views out over the coastal lowlands, out into the Coral Sea and the Great Barrier Reef. From the lookout we made our way to the Daintree Discovery Centre, but it was closed, so it was back on the road. Our day turned out to be a mixed bag of light showers, sunshine and mist. The road was a continual adventure of twists, turns, sharp corners, steep inclines and steep descents. In places there was very little land between the edge of the road and the ocean, shortly followed by lush rainforest on both sides of the vehicle. Around 9 o'clock we made it to Cape Tribulation, a remote ecotourism headland where the ancient Daintree rainforest meets the Great Barrier Reef. It had been drizzling on and off since we crossed the Daintree. As we pulled into the parking area, we quickly walked up to the lookout with stunning views of the Coral Sea, such a picturesque view with the low hanging clouds over the ranges. Located 35 kilometres north of the Daintree River Ferry, yes, it did take us that long to get here. It is a protected, biologically diverse area where the forest tumbles right down to the coast, with just a thin strip of sand separating it from the clear blue water. Named by Lieutenant James Cook in 1770 after his ship struck a reef, marking the beginnings of his troubles. As it was still drizzling, we didn't stay long. We were leaving behind the pristine coastline on one side and the 165-million-year-old ancient Daintree rainforest, home to a wealth of fauna, from colourful cassowaries and tree kangaroos. Not that we saw either, as I think the damp weather kept them away. Here at Cape Tribulation the road becomes the Bloomfield Track, as we began to head inland. From what I had seen and read, I had thought the Cape Tribulation Road took us all the way to Cooktown, but how wrong I was, as beyond Cape Tribulation it becomes the unsealed Bloomfield Track, a short 30 to 45 kilometre section between Cape Tribulation and the Wujal community that starts about 40 kilometres north of the ferry. Wild and beautiful, the Bloomfield Track is one of the most scenic short road trips on the Cape. From Cape Tribulation we were in for just over 100 kilometres of travel to Cooktown. Just north of Cape Tribulation we came to the Donovan Range, a steep 20% gradient section of the Bloomfield Track, featuring a concrete paved surface to aid traction, offering scenic mountain rainforest views, but we were busy watching the road. This was turning into an unforgettable experience. The track itself is only roughly 30 kilometres of road, passing through the Donovan and Cowrie ranges, then ends at the Aboriginal community of Wujal, through some of the most intact tropical and untouched wilderness in the country. Constructed between 1983 and 1984, the road has been the subject of environmental protests during and since its construction. The route is an alternative to the Mulgrave Highway further inland. The track is fairly narrow in places, and we were always on the lookout for oncoming traffic. I took copious amounts of footage along this section of the road in an attempt to give some understanding and insight into the road and the conditions. No amount of words can really do justice to the region. Rick and I were rather surprised by just how good the road was, as we had heard that there were a lot of corrugations. But then again, we did meet roadworks in a couple of places. Taking photos really, though, was a little tricky, as often I would line something up only to have Rick drive over a puddle or hole in the road. It certainly kept me on the ball. It really was amazing country. As we descended one corner or switchback, I would call it, I was glad there was no oncoming traffic. We followed a vehicle for some kilometres and kept a close eye on tail lights as they braked for corners or washouts in the road. The closer to Wujal we got, the country began to change, leaving behind the enclosed rainforest. The rainforest canopy was forever changing, from lush green patches to more open sections with palm trees. Some of the creek crossings were very rough in the bottoms, while others we just seemed to glide through. Even the colour of the soils changed from one section to another. On occasions we peeked through the top of the canopy, while on other occasions we were cloistered in amongst the vegetation. From a gradual roller coaster ride up and down rises, over creek crossings and along straight sections of the road, it was stimulating. In some of the creek crossings you could see further up the creek, while in others vegetation hugged the banks right down to the water's edge. In more open country the tree species changed, and we could see small patches of open flats or very small undulating patches of pasture. The Bloomfield track remained narrow for most of its length, but thankfully there were sections wide enough to pass oncoming traffic. It certainly was well worth the drive, even though I am not fond of enclosed spaces. Just 33 kilometres from Cape Tribulation was the Bloomfield River, just outside of Wujal. Had it not been for the painted sign at the T intersection, we would not have known about the nearby Wujal Falls, also known as the Bloomfield Falls. From the car park we took a short stroll along a rocky path to a viewing point of the falls as they cascade 40 metres down the rocky escarpment. The falls, though only small, were stunning and well worth the stop, as it was in the opposite direction to where we were headed. The Bloomfield River rises southeast of Wujal and generally flows east by north before reaching its mouth and emptying into Weary Bay in the Coral Sea near Daintree. Thankfully, the river estuary is in near pristine condition and hopefully remains that way for a long time. At the falls we could see the result of flooding that the river is known for, with debris and trees pushed onto their side. Just over 70 kilometres from Cape Tribulation we stopped at the Lion's Den near Helen's Vale for lunch. Not far south of Cooktown, the den has a rustic feel about it. Fashioned from timber and iron and full of tin mining history and quirky memorabilia, the Lion's Den was not at all what I had expected, thinking it was more remote than it actually was. I think it has been given a lot of hype, but we did have great hamburgers for lunch. Established in 1875 to serve miners during the Palmer River Gold Rush, the hotel is one of Queensland's oldest continuously operating pubs, famously named after a nearby tin mine. The Lion's Den is situated where the Little Annan River and Mungumbi Creek join. Just before midday we crossed Annan River, with headwaters in Yorkeys Range, north-northwest of Wujal, before reaching the Coral Sea at Walker Bay, about 4 kilometres south of Cooktown. From the Lion's Den we continued making our way to Cooktown, joining the Mulligan Highway 4 kilometres north of the Lion's Den. As we joined the Mulligan we passed what looked like a huge pile of black rocks. At first glance the mounds of black rock looked like coal mine perched next to the highway, so we stopped at the lookout for a closer look. We were looking at lumps of dried lava, an imposing mountain of black granite boulders balanced on top of each other, some the size of houses stacked precariously on top of one another, appearing to defy both gravity and logic. Formed roughly 260 million years ago when molten magma solidified deep underground into hard granite. As the surrounding softer rock eroded over millions of years, the granite was exposed and fractured into the massive piled boulders in front of us. The black colouring is actually a microscopic nitrogen-fixing blue-green algae growing on the grey granite. From the Lion's Den to Cooktown was an easy half-hour's drive, arriving just after 1. We were now about a quarter of the way to the tip. Cooktown is at the mouth of the Endeavour River, where it enters the Coral Sea on Cape York Peninsula, and where James Cook breached his ship for repairs in 1770. As we drove down the main street, we were intrigued by the patchwork of architectural styles, featuring a mixture of coastal dwellings alongside gold rush opulence. Both the town and Mount Cook, which rises 431 metres up behind the town, were named after James Cook. The town was founded in 1873 as a supply port for the goldfields along the Palmer River. The area around Cooktown is unusually rich in biodiversity, being close to 3 major ecozones that are vastly different ecologically and geographically, containing over 3,000 plant species and more than 500 terrestrial vertebrates, recorded on Cape York Peninsula with many rare and unusual species. Cooktown was a port for the goldfields, with many different people in the thousands from all walks of life flocking to the town in 1873 on their way to the goldfields. It is said that more than 30,000 people passed through the area, a stark contrast to today's population of around 2,500 people. The Cook Shire, with its main administrative centre here in Cooktown, is the largest land area shire in Queensland, stretching from the Bloomfield River in the south to just north of the Jardine River, covering more than 100,000 square kilometres and occupying 80% of Cape York Peninsula. The Shire of Torres, based on Thursday Island, includes the northernmost part of Cape York Peninsula, together with the islands of the Torres Strait. Being the only Australian local government area which abuts an international border with Papua New Guinea and is in close proximity to the Indonesian province of Irian Jaya, making it a unique part of the country. Just out of Cooktown we crossed the Endeavour River, one of 2 major river systems in the Cooktown area, the other being the Annan River. The river system comprises 3 branches that are sourced by runoff from the Henderson and Adair ranges and flows generally east from the Great Dividing Range to the Coral Sea. We passed Lily Creek Dragon Fruit Plantation, a 70-acre property that produces dragon fruits, passion fruits alongside lychees, jackfruits and rambutans. Dragon fruits are also known as strawberry pears and is a fruit of several species of cactus native to southern Mexico and the Pacific coasts of Guatemala, Costa Rica and El Salvador. After germination, these climbing plants will find something to climb on, which can involve putting aerial roots down from the branches in addition to the basal roots. Once it reaches a mature 4.5 kilograms in weight, the plants may flower. Interestingly, plants bloom overnight and usually wilt by the evening, relying on nocturnal pollinators for fertilization. From what I have read, a very tricky plant to fruit. However, the plants can flower between 3 and 6 times per year depending on growing conditions. Like other cacti, if a healthy piece of the stem is broken off, it may take root in the soil and become its own plant, and I began to wonder how long before it escapes cultivation and becomes a weed. About 45 kilometres northwest of Cooktown, after a roller coaster ride up and down hills, we pulled into Hopevale, the oldest continuing mission community in North Queensland. Immediately offshore of the town is the port of Cape Flattery, that has a 500-metre jetty with a conveyor belt to load ships with silica sand from the Cape Flattery mine. It has a second wharf for the import of fuel and other supplies needed for the mine. From Hopevale, the sealed road wound its way through white silica sandhills, past rugged escarpments and heathlands to Elim Beach, approximately 25 kilometres from Hopevale. The last section into Elim Beach was quite sandy as we made our way in and around trees, but what an amazing spot. Our overnight camp, set in amongst paperbark trees not far from the water's edge, with fabulous views of Cape Bedford in the distance and the mesmerising dune formations of the coloured sands, about a 300-metre walk along the beach. After setting up the troopy, there was little left to do but enjoy the surroundings. Rick and I took a walk down to the wide sandy beach. The tide was on its way out, but what a sight! Cape Bedford and Elim Beach form a 50-kilometre long and between 2 and 20-kilometre wide inland coastal dune system, representing one of the most extensive coastal dune systems in the humid tropics. Prevailing southeasterly trade winds drive sand transported from beaches that face inland, creating a complex dune morphology with heights exceeding 100 metres. Radiocarbon dating indicates most dunes achieved stability approximately 10,000 years ago during the Holocene sea level stabilisation. However, the system remains geomorphically active, with the erosion, transportation and deposition of materials or sediments by wind activity, basically shaping the landscape in this arid coastal environment, especially with the sparse vegetation of the area. Later that afternoon we sat and reflected on our day's journey that had been nothing short of incredible. What an experience it has been driving through the Daintree rainforest up the Cape Tribulation track. Even Cooktown was fascinating. The weather has been a mixed bag of light showers, bright sunshine and overcast cloudy conditions, but it all added to the adventure. Just as dusk was approaching, Rick and I went down to the beach again, surprised by how far the tide had receded, to watch the flying foxes as they left to feed for the night in the tea trees along the coastline. A large expanse of the beach faced Cape Bedford, bathed in the paler shades of the setting sun. What a way to end a day! Rick and I will leave you here as we enjoy the last remaining rays of sunlight over the coastal dune system, the area's hidden gem. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Join us next time as we check out Isabel Falls, Old Laura Homestead and the Hahn River Crossing. Take care. Enjoy your travels. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Living Life.